we have a very, very special guest for this edition of Downforce Meets, and I'm joined by a man that started his motorsport travels around about 2 decades ago. Around about sort of, if I remember correctly, it was around about sort of the early 2000s with Joe Saywood of grandprix.com, and at that time he was with the... was cutting his teeth covering the University of Leeds Formula Student team. Formula Student still going along now. He's got a political studies degree and did it on the politics of Formula One. And this particular man was given an opportunity to be part of the official Formula One magazine under David Tremaine. Then 2004 saw him tour in a camper van, the Formula One European side of things. But then things really kicked up a notch for my guest, who became the press officer for the newly formed GP2 series, and the following year, in 2005, the director of communications. He now is the face and the voice of F1 Digital, Will Buxton. Thank you for joining me, Will.
Thank you very much for having me on and making me feel quite incredibly old at the same time.
You've got a couple of years to catch up with me. I must be honest, but of course, you are now an accomplished author. You are published.
That's incredible.
So the title of the book is My Greatest Defeat. Available from Evero Publishing. It's $19.99. It is available now. Now, Will, the first question I've got to ask is that on publishing day, you got a very specific cake, didn't you?
I did. My wonderful fiance surprised me with a party on my launch day and had turned the front cover of the book into a cake, which was amazing, and a whole bunch of mates came over to the house and we all celebrated, which was lovely, and I had no idea that it was even going to happen. So it was really fantastic, and put a massive smile on my face. It's as you say, it's for me personally, it's a huge achievement to have a book published. It's something that I've wanted to do for my whole career, and for the last 18 odd years, been searching for that title, that one idea that really resonated with me, and this was it. And so I'm incredibly proud to see it out there, and the feedback so far appears to be really positive, and people are enjoying it, which means everything.
Now, I first of all wanted to talk to you about the genesis of the book, Will, because something like this, where you've got a who's who of motorsport royalty, Alessandro Zanardi, Mario Andretti, Dario Franchitti, and that's just for starters. Then, of course, Niki Lauda, a guy who personifies the word. I think the word I would use is probably an enigma, very much like Alex Zanardi, coming back from the accident of the Nordschleife in 1976. 6 weeks later, being in the Ferrari at Monza to finish 4th, even with the scars not fully healed after the skin graft, following the horrific treatments he went through back in the 70s.
And yet that wasn't his lowest moment, and that was the most fascinating thing with the whole process of the book. And the original idea was to talk to racers about the race that sort of broke their heart, the one where they'd been leading for 70 laps and then their engine blew. But it very quickly became something else, and it was actually the interview with Niki that did that, because he said that actually the accident in 76, coming back, Ferrari not really wanting him to be there, the help he went through in 77 and Maranello, that wasn't as low as his life got. The lowest point for him was when he ran Lauda Air and they lost the flight over Thailand. And for 8 months he fought to clear the name of his pilot. He went to every funeral. He just said, I will find out what happened. And that, for him, carrying that burden of responsibility, that was his hardest moment. That was his lowest ebb. Similarly with Alex Zanardi, losing his legs was not his lowest moment. If anything, he says for him, it allowed him to find a part of himself that he never knew existed. So it was actually a huge positive for him. So what I expected them to talk about, these guys didn't. They speak of the kind of things that affect everybody. It's death, it's depression, it's dependency, divorce, all the uplifting, happy things. But ultimately, it's the fact these guys they're human beings. They're flesh and they're bone, and when you take off the helmet and you take off the overalls, what's left is a real person. And what affects that real person is what can affect you or I. And it very quickly became a book about the human spirit. and achieving despite our setbacks, how we can use those setbacks as steps forward, as inspiration, and as I guess the sort of the foundations of our greatest sort of accomplishments.
Now, of course, you've worked in the F1 paddock for quite a time, and of course, getting the chance to come back with FOM themselves under the Liberty Media banner. I remember when you and I think, last met at the 2014 British Grand Prix, when obviously everyone wore the pink shirts in tribute to Papa Smurf, John Button,
Yes.
Jensen's dad, which was, I think, quite an emotional day, I think, for a lot of people, especially JB, because I remember that weekend.
Yes.
I think I asked my first and only FIA press conference question, and it just so happened to be when that weekend Lewis and Mercedes, I think, dropped the ball there slightly in qualifying. The conditions were quite greasy, and JB ended up third. But yeah, like you say, there are a lot of people in motorsport that do have, as you say, depression, mental health, anxiety, insomnia, which a lot of people these days sort of like either don't mention it or don't feel comfortable mentioning it. And like you say, Niki Lauda's mental strength was, I think, a bit of a force de rigueur, so to speak, when he was looking at what James Hunt was doing, God rest his soul, because we lost James back in 1993, so I bet they're talking about old times up in the skies above.
I'm sure.
But his resolve, his determination, his raw focus, and his absolute heart on his sleeve honesty was something. I mean, you've got to know Niki over the past few years, unfortunately, before his passing. What's your favourite moment, apart from, like, we've seen pictures of Toto and Niki walking down the paddock holding hands, and that kind of thing, where you could see the humour of Niki and Toto. They were like two kindred spirits, both from Austria. What was your favourite moment or moments of Niki over the time you got to know him?
Oh goodness, I think the one thing that really stands out about Niki was just his sense of humour, and just to deal with everything with grace and a bit of a kind of a cheeky jape, and that was a side of Niki that, alongside the strength and the resilience, with that humour, I think that was a really great side of him. So that's what I'll remember, I think, more than anything about Niki, and also just his total honesty. As you say, wore his heart on his sleeve, but Niki had been to hell and back, and he didn't have to pander to anybody or anything. He could always just tell it the way that it was, which is very rare these days. So it was a great thing.
Now, I wanted to go through a little bit of the passage that is actually in the book, available, like I say, Evero Publishing, 1999. It's been out since the 30th of May. But then he describes in a lot of detail with the Lauda Air crash in Thailand in 1991, where the O-ring jumped out of the position and the thrust reverser was thrown out. And he was very resolute in saying to Boeing, "Have you tested it? Have you found out whether it's going to cause the problem? Have you simulated?" And Boeing were very, very sort of reticent to sort of try and do something, but Niki just kept on pushing, and that was just a real showcase of his character, wasn't it?
Yeah, and right up to the point where Niki knew what the problem was, had tested it over in the simulator and realised that it was impossible to pull the plane out, and so went to Boeing and said, "This is the issue," and Boeing refused to accept it. So Niki said, "Right, okay, cool, if you're so confident, then let's take the plane up right now. And if the pilots bring it down, then great, okay, fine, we'll accept that it was our fault and not Boeing's fault. But if the plane comes down and crashes, which it will do, then you have to accept culpability." And Boeing said, "Well, we're not going to do that." And the next day began the process of admitting that, yes, there was a problem with the thrust reverser. And so they've now, also ever since then, there has been an amendment to the way in which that was designed, which means it can never happen again. And that's Niki's absolute, you talk about determination and just, going for, have that single-mindedness, and that was it. This is what's going to happen. And, an amazing guy.
Now, we'll also talk a bit. I like the subtext under the cover, which is great. It's got some fantastic artwork by Giuseppe Camuncoli, which also has a really, really wonderful picture of Nicky in there. It's stories of heartache and hope from motor racing's finest heroes. I mean, Dario Franchitti. Obviously, there's someone else in the F1 paddock that you will know very, very well indeed. Current DTM runner and Sky Sports F1 pundit Paul Di Resta, who I've had the chance of meeting and interviewing in DTM. But Dario talking about what happened when he had that nasty crash, and obviously what transpired afterwards. I mean, it was quite an emotional, I think, talk that you had with Dario in that kind of respect.
Yeah. And Dario's one was amazing because we sort of found ourselves having breakfast in London, and it was a real. It was a sort of, I think, almost a level of catharsis for him to talk about things that maybe he hadn't spoken about before. And, we talk about Greg Moore and we talk about Dan Weldon and obviously the big crashes that Dario had, but also, losing friends and what that did to him. And I think it was one of the amazing things with the book as a whole, with the number of interviews that I did with racers who seemed to just open up and want to open up and talk about things that maybe they hadn't spoken about before. And it formed some level of, I don't know, it's like they just wanted to get it off their chest and wanted to talk about it. And it was a huge thing. And to see them being open and honest and, at a time when we're all being told that it's okay to struggle and it's okay to admit that you're not doing so well. My hope is that these great heroes of our sport, showing their fragility, showing that they have struggled and they've been to hell and come through the other side, hopefully that will help other people who are struggling in that place, to see that it's not abnormal. It is a totally normal thing, and that if the heroes have gone through it as well, then, these are them opening up too.
So in many respects, what you're saying there, apart from the cathartic nature of having these discussions, it's also a bit of closure. To sort of put that as water under the bridge, so to speak. But I would understand that, obviously, with regards to, obviously, the conception to then getting to that point where, right, that's the final draft, and you can sort of say to yourself, it's been a lot of hard work. I haven't been able to meet everybody face to face. I've done the conversations on the phone or FaceTime or Skype or whatever, depending on everyone's availability. A bit like us, we're on the phone right now. So it's because, so many people have so many different lives that they lead post-racing, or if they are still currently active thereof. It's very much a case of, how long did it actually take to write the book and really sort of mould it into what has become the finished article that has got so much acclaim and is in the top 500, I think, in Google Books, if memory serves me correctly?
It's amazing. It took about 18 months to get everybody together and get all the stories assembled. And I set myself a limit of 20 stories. And I think we got a really good cross-section of Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR, Le Mans, Rally. Obviously, there were some guys in there that I really wanted to get. That hopefully we'll be able to put into a volume 2 if this one's successful enough that it leads to enough. But guys like Jackie Hicks or AJ Foyt or Parnelli Jones, people that we didn't manage to talk to for this one, that I'd love to get into a future issue. About 18 months, and then the last sort of 6 months really spent with the publishers, making it right, getting it perfect, and getting it off to print. But everybody that's in the book, I made sure that once I had got their chapter right, that they were happy with it, because ultimately it's their stories, it's their words, and I wanted them to be happy with what was going out, and they were comfortable with it before it went out. And what was wonderful was that, to a man, they all replied and said, you know what, yeah, this is great, and I'm really happy with this, and I'm happy for you to put this story out there into the world and for people to read it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you an idea just who, apart from some of the drivers we've just been talking about, of course, the late Niki Lauda, so Ruhe in Frieden Niki, as they say in his native language. So, Mario Andretti, this is in alphabetical order. Mario Andretti, a true legend who's still, what was it? For the Indy 500, he got the NBC anchor that was working alongside Danica Patrick and drove him in the two-seater to Indy. That's one hell of a way to make an entrance. You've then
I've had a two-seater ride with Mario at Sonoma, and I can tell you he's still on it. He is absolutely still on it.
Derek Bell, Emerson Fittipaldi, Dario Franchitti, Jeff Gordon, Mika Hakkinen, Damon Hill, 1996 Formula One World Champion, Jimmy Johnson, Mr. Le Mans, well, one of two Mr. Le Mans, because you've mentioned Jackie Ickx, I'm going to mention the other one now, Tom Christensen, Nicky, Sebastian Loeb, Mr. Rally himself, of course, someone who is now the CIK FIA President of Karting, but is also still active in Formula E, Felipe Massa, Rick Mears, Emanuele Pido, Alain Prost, Carlos Sainz, Sir Jackie Stewart, Bobby Unser, Adi Vatanen, and Alex Zanardi. That is one heck of a list, my friend.
It's not bad, is it?
When you started to sort of do the initial approaches, well, was it sort of like thinking, okay, like some of it was like, yeah, they were like, yeah, not a problem, and then when you get like you're on tenterhooks and you're waiting for that response, like the PR or the PA will say, yeah, it's not a problem, we can get that sorted for you. And then you're like, whoa, I didn't expect that one.
It was, do you know what, it was amazing. As I said, the first interview with Nicky, and having someone like Nicky on board with the project right from the get-go, was when you approach people and they say, well, who's on board? And you say, well, so far I've spoken to Nicky Lauda and Derek Bell, and you start sort of amassing that list of people, and they say, oh, okay, great, and then it doesn't become a question. Which is amazing. I bumped into Jeff Gordon in the paddock in Singapore, and I explained the concept for the book to him, and he just jumped at it and said, I want to be a part of it, I really want to be a part of this. So that was lovely, actually going to the guys and saying, this is what I want the book to be, this is what I think it can do. They very much jumped on it. Interestingly, current racers were less sort of willing to give it a go, and the only sort of turn downs that we got were from current racers. I think because it required a level of openness and honesty that for racers who are currently at the top of their game, maybe would allow a little chink in their armour, and that's something that they weren't willing to give out. And I've got a huge amount of respect for that, huge amount of time for that. And hopefully, once they might want to come back and talk about it.
Now, thank you very much for talking to us about the book, but I wanted to get... Now, this is where you are a man in the paddock. Your paddock pass, pre and post, weekends, which are available on YouTube for everyone to see. It must be a really... First of all, to have that chance to go back under the Formula One family banner as the F1 digital presenter, I bet you were sort of like thinking, NBC Sports, you and Jason Swells and the whole team. The stuff with off the grid. I know you love going to Austin every year. Especially when you started rocking the old cowboy boots and the 10-gallon hat. But you've also done a lot of work over in Austin, obviously for those people who are less fortunate, but. Having that opportunity to go back under FOM, which is under Kerry Chase and Liberty Media now, which is trying to bring a lot more excitement to Formula One, and I think personally, from what I've seen, from what they're trying to do, getting Ross Brawn to be head of technical, I had a really wonderful chat, of all people, someone who's now working for him, Rob Smedley, and I spoke with Rob at Wilton Mill for the Bambino Kart Series opener. And we had this fantastic interview, and it was just like, I just want to. He said, I want to give something back. And then Rob got pulled into. It was like he said to me, there was a committee, but they've called it Smedley Junior Racing Team. I didn't really have a choice. They voted for me. But to see how Formula One is now developing under the new ownership, obviously since Bernie. Not being, still being in very ways sort of in touch with Formula One, but not being at the helm. How much has that changed from your perspective, even though you're working for FOM and Liberty? How much has that changed in terms of your thoughts about how they're trying to change things for the fans and the general interaction with with F1 TV and things like that.
I mean, I think what's wonderful is the openness, that the approach of just embracing all the positive aspects of the sport, embracing the fans, really opening it up. And I think we're in a golden age, particularly from a media perspective, for Formula One. In terms of the accessibility, in terms of the interaction with fans, and it's a really great time to be a part of it. To be part of it officially is amazing because you think you might have your sort of individual or independence curtailed by working for the man, as it is, and yet the opposite is true. They were very honest from the outset that they wanted us all to maintain, that element of our individuality and our independence, and to just talk about things as they were, and not to be worried so much that we are working for the official sort of outlet. And it's a tricky rope to sort of balance on, but hopefully we fall just the right side of that.
Now I wanted to talk about the interesting dynamic that we now have. We have a very, very more mature Max Verstappen, who is, I have to say, doing a really, really good job. Red Bull have now got the Honda power units in, obviously with Toro Rosso having had that last year with Pierre Gasly and Brendan Hartley. That's showing a good sign of the things to come from Max, but also we've got the Zandvoort Grand Prix for 2020, so it's the first time, I think, in about 35 years that Formula One will have visited the lovely Circuit Park Zandvoort, which I myself have been to. Proper old school track. I mean, that must be exciting to have a Dutch driver that now has his own home Grand Prix rather than having to be Spa.
Absolutely. I think we're all really looking forward to going back to Zandvoort. It's, the Dutch fans are phenomenal and always have been. So even when there wasn't a Dutch driver in the sport, they've always been vocal. They've always been massive motorsport fans. So, yeah, to be going to Zandvoort is great. Looking at how much the calendar is changing and evolving, it's brilliant for the sport. As you've already touched on, the race in Vietnam is one we're all looking forward to. So, yeah, real positivity in where the calendar's going. And as you say, Max is turning into such a force. And hopefully with a car underneath him that can take him back to Grand Prix victories again. Hopefully by the time he gets back to his home Grand Prix, will be massively positive.
But then we've got the interesting dynamic by... I have to say, a very, very reinvigorated Valtteri Bottas, who has, Lewis has been very, very honest in saying that, I've been struggling, and several pole positions in a row for Valtteri. But then comes one, I think it reminded me of Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell, 1992. It was a modern day era copy of what happened, and Max, bless his little cotton socks, tried to go up the inside, coming out of the tunnel, and it was just like, I was just like, when is it going to happen that he's going to try and go through up past, through the tunnel at about 260 to 270 kilometres per hour, then try and do what Sergio Perez did quite successfully a couple of years ago with McLaren when he was running alongside Jensen. To go up the inside and try and get that little nick there, but it just didn't work out for him. But for Lewis to be on the medium tyres for 68, 69 laps, and this is the thing. We look back at 1992 and we really stellified that race, and that was only for a couple of laps that Mansell was really sort of haranguing Senna, and Mansell had the better car, and although Max had the better tyres and more grip at the end of the race, he did have a deficit on power, so that's why Lewis was able just to get out of those corners a little bit quicker, and then Max was always trying to overcome a deficit that ultimately he couldn't. But it showed, I think it showed Max's maturity, that he didn't go for that lunge earlier and throw it all away and take the boat out, because let's be honest, 12 to 18 months ago that might not have been the case. It showed a great drive from Lewis. Brilliant drive from Lewis. And as you say, the dynamic we've got with Valtteri coming along as well is huge. I don't know if Lewis saying he's been average so far this year is really true, or if Lewis is just trying to downplay the success of Valtteri alongside him. There's always mind games in all of this, so I think you have to take it all with a pinch of salt. But then also, I think there's always been this divide about Monaco. And if I'm completely honest, I mean, the first race I watched was with Ayrton, 1988, when he was leading by nearly a lap over Alain, and then bins it into Poitiers. And that was, the way that he was just driving was on rails. And then you get a lot of modern-day Formula 1 fans. And this is not a dig at anybody, but there is a divide. But the last 2 years of Monaco have shown, okay, despite the glitz and the glamour, and we have Prince Albert II handing out the trophies, it's great because we have a royal presence on the Formula 1 calendar in some way, shape or form. And it just so happens to be the Principality of Monaco. But the last 2 years, I think maybe some of these fans might start to think, well, you know what? Monaco actually is pretty exciting, considering Daniel Ricciardo last year had an energy recovery system problem and fought tooth and nail to keep Seb at bay. Seb didn't have that opportunity to get past him because that Daniel just he said, "Is there anything we can do?" Sorry, he said, "I'll work with it," and that's Daniel. And then we have a really exciting Grand Prix this week. The other week. But I just think that Monaco should be part of that sort of core structure. Wouldn't you agree?
No, totally. I think it's the cars that have outgrown the track a little bit, and maybe we need to get the dimensions of the cars back under control again. Just to potentially allow for a little bit of overtaking. But overtaking has always been at a premium for Monaco. It's always been next to impossible. But as you say, the last few years have shown that you don't necessarily need a huge amount of overtaking to make for an exciting race. You can have an exciting race that is based on tension, that is based on expectation of, when will that one move come? Will that one move come? Can it come? Or can the guy ahead, cling on for dear life? And that's ultimately, it's a different kind of excitement, but it's no less exciting.
One final question, Will, to finish up. It's been a really wonderful interview. It's been great catching up with you as always. But the amount of tributes that came out for Nicky, Mercedes running the Halos in red, and then we have the GPDA, which I think it was Julia Wirtz, whose son Charlie was actually racing at Adria this past weekend. So it was a pleasure to commentate over one of the Wirtz boys this year. But with the hats that were provided by the GPDA, with the Nicky lettering on the front, and then everyone else, I think it's just and then Sebastian and Lewis both wearing Nicky.
I think the only time in history that a driver's come first and second in the Grand Prix, and it was Nicky.
I think there was a lot of emotion around Monaco going into the weekend, and then just the solidarity of the Formula One community. But I mean, especially to pay tribute to such a great bloke. Just really your thoughts over that whole weekend, because it must have been a roller coaster of emotions for you, because you're the guy that everyone sort of, you do a lot of posting on Instagram nowadays. Your Twitter's heavily active. But also on the digital side, things have been ramping up, and it must have been really, really at times difficult, because when I was at the Rotax Max Euro Trophy in Adria, which we discussed briefly before we had this interview, that it was very emotional for me wearing an official Ferrari T-shirt, and I found it difficult to get my words out. I mean, I know for a fact that the emotions must have been doing Watusi in your head about Nicky.
It's a funny thing, we'd known Nicky was ill for a long time. But the thing with Nicky is he just always appeared invincible. And you thought, Nicky's poorly, but, Nicky's had a lung transplant, But you just sort of assumed he'd get better because it's Nicky. And he can beat anything, and he'd probably outlive us all. And so to know that he wasn't there anymore it was a shock, obviously, and his presence was missed from the very first moment, because any time somebody walked past in a red hat, you just assumed it was Nicky, and then you had to double take and realize that it wasn't. And I think what was lovely, though, over the weekend was that once the initial sadness passed, the whole weekend was spent with people telling stories. And, what was their favourite joke that Nicky used to tell them, or what was their favourite Nicky story? And everywhere you went, you heard people doing impressions of Nicky. His very distinctive, kind of rasping Austrian accent that obviously was a leftover from the horrific injuries that his lungs had sustained in that accident at the Nürburgring in '76. And that was the lovely part of it, with people just remembering him. You mentioned the GPDA, having a tribute to Nicky. It's worth remembering, 25 years ago, after the death of Ron Ratzenberger and Alex Zanardi, it was Nicky that reconvened that first meeting of the GPDA at Monaco. So kind of fitting that it should be there that he was remembered. He was a massive part of the sport. The sport will forever, be changed and be what it is because of him. He was just a force. And as you say, a great guy, a very honest guy, and one who will be massively missed.
Yes, and we do have to remember that the person that was also a director of the GPDA at that point in time, standing alongside him, who's just celebrated his 60th birthday, is none other than ex-Formula One driver turned co-commentator at Sky Sports F1, Mr. Martin Brundle.
Mr. Martin Brundle, indeed.
So, but Will, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us here on Downforce Radio. So, Downforce meets with Will Buxton. Don't forget, My Greatest Defeat, available now, $19.99 from Evro Publishing. It's in the top 500 in Google Books. Will, all the very best of luck in Canada. Looking forward to seeing another cracking race, and who knows what might happen. I think anything's possible in Formula One, and pretty much it normally is, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I can't wait to get out there. Thanks so much for your time, mate. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all.